damn thing I could have done about it.
This thing, I got to noticing its eyes. Its eyes was real evil, real sinister looking. You know, the look it was giving me.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
See ya.
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Welcome to Sasquatch Chronicles. If you'd like to give us a call, phone number is 646-716-8791. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the show. As Shannon's aware of it, I think Will is somewhat aware of it. Man, I almost missed the show tonight. My own show.
That's what happens when a personal life intrudes on the show.
That's
yeah.
right.
Crazy. My son was playing soccer today, and it was like a 2.5 hour drive there, and then 2.5 hours to get back. And it's funny, like with women, I had my girlfriend drive back because she's more of a leadfoot than I am. Women have this ability to tailgate someone and be within a matter of inches of hitting their bumper and going at like 75 miles an hour, and it doesn't faze them one bit.
They are
Nerves
one
of steel,
with the
baby.
bumper.
Yeah,
right.
I'm in the passenger seat. Like, I'm all for it, but my butt cheeks are clenched, and, like, I'm holding on for dear life, and I'm like, please
Go,
don't hit the
Mimi.
You
brake.
know you're about to die any second, you know, a horrible, painful death.
It'll be over quick.
Yeah. Gosh, so many things to get to. I know December 1st, we have the website going live, and I'm getting pretty excited about that. I know there's a lot of people that have questions about, I feel like we've answered a lot of the questions. If you have questions about the website, feel free to call in tonight. I'm going to try and start taking more calls than I have in the past. Again, the number to call in is 646-716-8791. But December 1st, that website goes live, and we'll have a bunch of paid content and the free content that everyone's been getting. So we hope that our fans will support us in our endeavor to build upon the show and make it bigger and better than what it is now. And we appreciate everyone's feedback and everyone's response to us taking the show in this route. We definitely appreciate everyone's feedback. Man, there's so many things to get to. Did you guys see that? I was just reading about it. The soldier in Afghanistan that claims to have gotten, he didn't know what it was. He said it was a gorilla, but it was at night and they were in the mountains and they had their thermals on. And the way he described it, he said it was an upright walking gorilla. And like none of the soldiers could figure out what is this gorilla doing out here in the middle of the Afghan desert out in the mountains. And I haven't really heard of any encounters out there. I know last week we had the lady from Mexico on, Lily, and it was interesting to hear that. But have you guys ever heard of any encounters out there in Afghanistan?
Actually, and I hate to say this because I can't really talk too much about it yet anyway, but I do have information about these creatures in that part of the world.
Awesome.
Oh, okay.
I had not heard that story.
And the reason I can't talk about it is if I talk about the details, it'll give away the source of that information.
Yeah.
So hopefully down the road I'll be able to come out with that.
More to come. Cool.
I could turn on the elevator music for the fans to listen to, and we could just talk about it privately and see. If you want to tell me?
Oh,
no, I'm curious.
Email.
Yeah, let's go ahead and mute out for a second.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've never heard of encounters in that part of in that part of the world. I know Sean had sent me an encounter, and I'm gonna try and get Sean on the phone. He's with the co-founders of AlbertaSasquatch.com, and he had interviewed some people that had an encounter. Right? Remember when we had Gord on? And Gord was talking about going, he was the mountain biker.
Mhm.
Well,
that was a very interesting account he sent.
right. There's one that's even more fascinating. In that area, this couple was going down the same area that Gord was describing. And I don't want to give too much of it away, but it was kind of a scary encounter. They had kind of surrounded them and pushed them back down the trail. And then one was actually standing in the trail. And so it kind of herded them. They felt like they were kind of being hunted and herded into an area. And make a long story short, they get herded into this open clearing, and these creatures are all around them in the bushes, and night's starting to fall, and so they start freaking out, and they decide to leave. They decide to get back on the trail and run. But it was kind of interesting. The way they tell the story is like, we felt like we were kind of hunted and herded to a certain area, because when they were walking down the trail after they had seen one of the creatures, they turned around and started running down the trail, and they could hear movement on both the left side and the right side. And the movement on the right side stopped, but in front of the trail, directly in front of them, was one standing right there. And so they kind of got off trail and into this open clearing. It's a real fascinating encounter, and I'm working on getting it on for the show.
It sounds like they're being pushed into an ambush location.
Yeah, that's kind of what they said. That's exactly how they felt, like they were being pushed into an ambush. They were kind of herded into a certain area, and they said that they felt, because night was falling, and they were pushed into this one open clearing, and he finally made the decision that they'll go back out on the trail, and if they face that thing again, they'll face it again, but they won't make it here sitting in this clearing all night. I can't wait to get him on. I'd love to hear that story.
It must be tough to feel like that's your only option after already seeing it in the trail like that and feeling they're around you. That must be really terrifying.
Yeah. No, I got a great encounter. It's one that we had recorded earlier in the week, and Shannon got a small taste of what it's like to vet some of the people that we have on the show. I think a lot of people think we just show up, click on the mic, and we got a wonderful guest, and there's really not a lot of work that goes into the show. But I'm sure, as you found out, Shannon, there's actually a lot of work that goes into making sure it's, it's a good story and it's something that's actually happened. There's so many that Will and I have had on, people that we've interviewed in the past, and I don't want to say anything disparaging, but some of the people, I'm just like, I don't know what you saw. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
It's been a learning curve for me, so that's just, there you go.
Yeah. No, before we get to playing that encounter, it was a great encounter of a Sasquatch that kind of charged a car, and then it was interesting to listen to some of the behaviors. You guys want to take a phone call before we jump into that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hello.
Chris. Hey,
Hi.
you're on the... How are you tonight?
And this is Will, and correct me if I'm wrong, Will, Les, Woody, and the lady. I'm still, I'm bad with names, but we'll start off with basically growing up. You guys can feel free to, throw in a question whenever you like. Stop me at a point, and such. Anyways, I live in San Jose. Grew up pretty much a city kid, but every summer grew up on the Pitt River fishing with my mother. She worked for PG&E here in California and had access to PG&E cabins on the Pitt River. And basically, my encounters, they were plural, and I didn't figure this out. I'm going to go ahead and lay it out. I did not see Bigfoot, but I'm going to leave you guys, since you guys are the experts, to tell exactly what happened with what I'm going to tell you. And two of them involved Klamath screams. That's what I call them. And one of them was being paralleled down the road by something that weighed easily as much as a cow or a horse, but it was on 2 feet. So anyways, growing up on the Pitt River, fishing, it was a great life. Now, when I got older, I started to invite friends, from high school. And so I got a friend from high school to come along at 15. His parents, let him come along with us, and we spent 2 weeks up there. And what the usual thing to do was we would skedaddle out onto the dam after the parents went to sleep. There was a dam on a reservoir called Tunnel Reservoir, which is fed by the McCloud River, and we're sitting by the spillway, and the water would feed down off a cliff down into the Pitt River Canyon. Anyways, we had the music going, we were trying to hang out with the girls from the other families of the parents in PG&E, and getting social and stuff, and so we're blaring our music, and my friend Steve, he was the big music aficionado, always had all the tunes, the Led Zeppelin and the Pink Floyd. All on this one particular evening, it was about 11:30 p.m. or so, and I do remember we were watching there's a meteor shower that comes through in August, around or early to mid-August, and that was the big thing, to go watch the stars and listen to music. So we ran out of the tunes of all the good songs, and my friend Steve put on an experimental early thing from Pink Floyd called Umaguma's Several Species of Small Furry Animals Gathered Together Grouping in a Cave with a Pict. Now, if you ever have had the chance to hear that tune, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. It sounds like animals, lots of little ones, including monkeys and squirrels and raccoons, all having a giant feast. It's like they're having a smorgasbord. Well, whatever happened, it pissed something off. And what happened was, me and Steve are sitting there yakking away, and there's about 5 other people on the dam, and we hear this thing like a man roar, but it was like a scream and a cry and a roar all in one, wrapped up in one. And let me tell you, even though it sounded like a mile away, it didn't seem like it was a threat to us at that point. Anyways, we hear this thing make its way up the canyon. Before the song's over, it's traveled half the distance upriver up this canyon, and before long, within another minute or so, it's up the spillway. The third time it screamed, the second time it screamed, everybody besides me and Steve heard it the first time, and we were kind of like, what? Well, did you hear something? Turn the music back up, nothing, go on, conversations continue. The second scream, everybody heard it, and they were like, what the hell was that? And upon that third scream, nobody wanted to see what it was. We all grabbed the radio and everything that was next to us and just took off high speed to the cabin, not looking back. We did not talk about it the next day. We weren't even supposed to be sneaking out onto that dam at night, and nobody talked about it.
The screams were getting closer each time it would emit the vocalization.
They were coming up so fast, it was unbelievable. And when it came up for the third scream, it was making its way up this spillway. That means it had to have gone up like a 75, maybe 125 foot, like sheer drop, where the water would just spill right off into the canyon. So right. It had to have scaled up that mountain, up that cliff, like nothing. And
so you guys didn't talk to anybody about it, and you didn't go back out there to look for any sign or anything what you might have seen?
No, and nobody said nothing about it, and I didn't think anything too much about it. I didn't. I hear you say, what was your knowledge of Sasquatch and some of the previous things, and when I'm 41 years old, I grew up. I saw stuff like monster stuff on, when I was real little. I think I remember seeing a clip of Patterson film, but I was too little and it was too fuzzy for me to even really think too much of. But I've heard about it, but I never really gave it any thought at all. And
so when you heard the screams, you didn't equate it to Bigfoot?
Oh, at that point, it just etched in my mind that I'd never heard anything like it, because we'd heard coyotes and there's mountain lions all over the place out there, and we've heard them scream and yelp, and we've heard it sounds like a woman being raped almost. It's a different. It was definitely this scream shut everything down. It shut everything down. I mean, everything got ugly real quick, and we all, literally, if you could interviewed any of us that night, we thought we were going to get eaten. I mean, that's the feeling we had. We had this feeling, and I remember clear as day the way it sounded. It sounded like, get the hell out of my area. This is my spot. You're in my area, and you need to leave now, or I'm coming to get you. And, it was like we took off. Now, fast forward, 2 or 3 years later, I go up with some friends without my mom to the cabin. We go up a little bit farther up the river and camp in just a Forest Service camp. There's no, facilities, nothing. And so you have to bring everything in. Well, one night we decided, we had met some people earlier that day and had decided to meet up with them at the hot springs. They have hot springs in the town of Big Bend, which is on the Pitt River. And they were pay hot springs, so you had to pay to get in, but if you waited till at night, you could float in on an inner tube. This is what the kids did for PG&E too. And we float in. We're hanging out with some of the locals, and a couple of friends of mine were, hanging out, and one of us got lucky. I was talking to a girl or whatever, and my friends just said, we're going to leave. I said, but wait, just hang on for a second. I'm talking. And they ended up leaving me there. And it was like, it's about midnight, maybe 12:30 or whatever. And I'm like, screw this. I got to get back, because I had a 7-mile walk up Hagen Flat Road, which turns into a dirt logging road to where our camp was. So I told the girl, I said, hey, do you have a flashlight I can borrow? I'll have to catch up with you tomorrow. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I said, she said, yeah, but there's no batteries. And I go, oh, geez. So I'm walking.
Oh, nice.
I'm walking back up this road, and literally like a quarter mile into this Hagen Flat Road, something starts to walk next to me. I caught it just off, like what the hell was that? Because I'm taking and I have a lighter, but I don't have no fluid in it, so I'm flicking my Bic just to make sure I'm still on the dirt road. And I can see that I'm on the dirt road by looking at the cut in the road. I can see the sky and the cut in the trees, so I can see I'm right in the center. But I don't want to veer off, and I'm moving along, trying to make pace back to my camp. And all of a sudden, crunch. Each step I put down, and this is in 1988, 89, each step I put down, crunch, and I stop, it stops. I start to move again, crunch. It's almost as if I can only tell you that whatever this thing was, it had to weigh at least, 700 700 pounds probably, and because it's breaking the stuff it's breaking underneath is breaking like matchsticks, the dead timber and the sticks, and I can hear it just snapping and breaking brush as it goes, but it's stopping right when I stop on a dime. Like
it wasn't trying
me
to stop you at all.
Oh no, it was letting me know that it was going to have me or something. I have no idea what was going on, but everything started to really get screwed, because I had to dig down and figure out what the hell my life is turning into, because at 16 years old, 17, whatever, I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to die right now, tonight. And I started to pray, and I hadn't been to church for years. And all of a sudden, I didn't forget how to pray. All of a sudden, my prayers start coming out, and it's coming out like something like, God, please make this thing go away. I will stop being an a-hole to people. I will stop smoking cigarettes. I'll stop being a jerk, and I'll start going back to church. And literally,
so you're finding God. You're finding God. You're finding God at this point, Chris.
Oh,
that would be the time to, definitely.
Yeah,
right?
I've been there. I laugh, but I've been there.
There was nothing to save my butt that night but God. That was it. It was almost like if you were to have been thrown off the boat where those sharks jump out of the water in South Africa and you're in the water. That's the feeling I have. It's imminent death, fear. You're going to die. And for whatever reason, I had come to this right away. There were the power lines go through the forest, and because this is all PG&E land, lots of right-of-ways, coming out of the river there. And anyways, this thing stops at the right-of-way. I'm in the middle of the right-of-way now, and there's a little red barn house kind of right underneath the power lines, and I contemplated going up to that house and knocking on the door and saying, please, let me in. There's something following me, and it's big, real big. And so, I thought to myself, if this guy, whoever this lives in this house, they don't know me from nothing. They don't expect no guests right now. They're probably going to answer the door with a gun, which could be just as bad. I don't know. I mean, I just said, you know what? You have to keep moving. But here I am. I'm standing under these power lines in the moonlight with my fists clenched, looking around like a fighter who's been surrounded by 20 people. I don't know which way. I'm looking every direction around me, and I'm kind of just spinning around like I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to F something up now because I've never had something like that happen to me to where I had to pray like that. It messed with my ego. I'm a big guy, I'm about 220, 230, and I'm close to 6 foot, and I didn't know what the heck to think, at that point, and so I just made my way back to camp, and I made it back, and I didn't talk about that next morning. I didn't say nothing to my buddies. They're all my age, and we just continued on our thing because I just didn't want nobody to think that I was crazy. Like if I came up with a story that what was left, I mean, this is I obviously it was on 2 feet, and obviously it had what I could imagine, and they didn't even have third generation night vision back then. As far as I know, I know they had a lot of problems up in that area with the pot growing and stuff. That grows. There was a lot of things back in the 80s. They were being told to the PG&E campers to watch out, don't stray off too far up into the mountains there, up above the river there on the other side. But so we didn't think.
Chris, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off. This isn't far from Mount Shasta, correct?
Right. This is very close to Mount Shasta, and yeah, it's in the Shasta National Forest.
So what did you think it was? I mean, what did you think this thing was? If you don't believe in Bigfoot, really?
I knew what it was at that point. I didn't really want to tell anybody else that what I experienced because I didn't want people to think anything like that. And the crazy thing is fast forward another 7 years, I joined the California Conservation Corps, and I wanted to get out of San Jose and get back into nature more. I really loved being out in nature, so I ended up stationed at California Conservation Corps Del Norte Requa on the mouth of the Klamath River on the Yurok Reservation, bordering the Redwood National Park.
I know that area.
Oh my God! So I end up getting injured in a car accident, and I'm taking some time to recover from my injuries down in town. I met a friend named Mike, and I just called him Uncle Jesse. He looked like the guy from Dukes of Hazzard. And one night I'm sitting there, and I'm taking out the trash because he's not charging me any rent. I just, he's backed up against the BLM there, and this is about 2 miles, about a mile south of where the Trees of Mystery thing is, where they have like a tourist attraction. Anyways,
right.
Back behind his house was a field, and then a whole lot of berry patches, and then and some swampy bog areas with redwoods, and I hear this thing again when I'm taking the trash out. I hear this thing again, and I run back in. I go, Mike, you got to come out here and listen to this. And he hears it, and finally, he goes, what? And then he does it, and then he goes, that's effing eerie. That's either Bigfoot, Sasquatch, I don't know what the hell it is. But you know what? About 2 nights ago, there was 2 of them, and they were yelling back and forth to each other across old man Pritchard's property. And I was going, no, shoot, It wasn't until I came home from the Conservation Corps back to San Jose where I met my wife-to-be, Rebecca, and learned to get on the computer and got computer literate. I usually just, X myself out in the beginning. I used to be so frustrated learning computers. But I came upon OregonBigfoot.com, and they had some sounds in there. And then when I went through the sounds, I noticed one thing that just automatically my hair went up, and I got goosebumps up my arms or the back of my neck, the Snohomish, the Puyallup, and, of course, the Klamath, where I was at. Those screams are all the same thing I heard. Only you would have to, the recordings, for anybody who's listened to them out there and has never heard this scream, they do not do justice. You hear what the sound is, but if you can play that like at an amphitheater, on megaphones, then then you know what you're dealing with, because that's what it sounds like. Yeah,
people don't understand the volume.
It's
well,
like
listen, Chris, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys being here and everything. There was one last little thing, and I don't know what it was. I just wanted to throw it in because I can't explain this. I was walking home in between those houses and Klamath, in between the trailer park from my friend's house to another's one night, and in the bog, in the swamp, I hear something just breaking sticks, and just like about 7, 8 feet up, I hear branches being ripped off the tree, and I hear them being banged between these trees, and they see these trees swaying, and I just, oh my God, I'm in the middle of this low spot where these swamp areas, and I got to make a run for it. I started praying again, and lo and behold, a rig came down, a logging truck, and lit up the highway, and I used it to run. But as this happened, I don't know what this is or what, if anybody's ever experienced this, but I didn't see anything in there, but it was almost like something took a leaf blower on a pulley, on a string, faced towards me from about 50 yards in on this swamp where the timber starts, and it's like this line came out towards me, and it was blowing brush, like blowing the blade grass that grew in this swamp to the sides, and when it came up, right up beside me as I was running, and blew right down the side of the highway next to me. I don't know what that was. Just thought I'd throw it in. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate you guys.
Well, thanks, Chris. I would definitely say, the vocalizations you've heard are probably Sasquatch.
Yeah.
I know those areas pretty well. A lot of bear up there. I see bear all the time up there, and they don't make those kinds of noises. So.
No. It's something that changed my life. It drives my family crazy because I talk and obsess over it, and you guys are like an AA meeting for an alcoholic when it comes to this subject. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I always use that analogy, and I hate using that analogy because, it sort of makes the subject look bad, but it really is. Unless you've experienced this, you really can't relate to it.
There's very, very, very few people for me to talk to in this world. I did not get a chance to talk with Dave Polides, even though he lived in the town next to me, Los Gatos. I'm here in San Jose. But I'll tell you, with everything that he's done, has definitely opened up and broadened my spectrum on everything, on putting things together as far as places, names. I definitely put the place names before him. I mean, I wouldn't say I did it before him, but I was onto something on my own California maps when it came to Diablo and stuff like devils and names, things like that. I was definitely all over it. I have them highlighted all over the maps, and as far as Oregon too. But he definitely opened up the avenues, and as far as berries, boulder patches, and swamps, because they're all part of that area in Mount Shasta and Klamath Requa where I was at, and it gives me chills. It makes me sick, but then I obsess with it once I get over that feeling. I'm back on it like a fiend, and I can't wait to move back up there so I can get back and make some more sense of this. But thank you guys.
Right.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you for calling in, Chris. We really do appreciate it. He gives some details in there. Sometimes when you hear certain encounters, like you've always said, Will, and I'm starting to really develop that. You can pick up when you hear BS right off the bat, or when you hear something legitimate right off the bat. And with Chris, I picked it up right off the bat that this guy heard something, man. When you hear what he's talking about with those screams and those roars, and you can't put an animal to it, it's just too loud. It has too much range. There's no way that it's a bobcat. There's no way that it's a cougar. It's no way it's a bear. You start going down through the list. And so I laughed a little bit, but I got what he was saying when you start praying to God and you're like, hey, if you get me out of this, I'll quit drinking. I'll quit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. And you notice what he did was really good. He went through the whole list of things to rule out first. Bigfoot wasn't even on the list. And when somebody jumps to the conclusion, the first thing is Bigfoot, I'm a little suspect. But when somebody runs down that list, and I've heard so many people over the years, and you're right, the more encounters you listen to, the faster you're able to tell whether something is real, it's maybe they heard something they're not sure, or it's complete garbage.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
you could hear the
Chris
stress in his voice.
Yeah. No, I think
Chris
really
his was a good. Yeah, I think so too.
Well, we got a lot of calls tonight. I know I got an encounter I want to play, but I want to jump to some of these calls. I know last week or on Wednesday when we did the call-in show, we really didn't get to 10% of the phone calls we had. Let's jump to Dan. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to tell us about your encounter?
Yeah. This happened about 5 years ago. I was on a website. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of the website, but I was on. I'm going to say which site it is, but if that's against the rules, I apologize. But I was on Oregon Bigfoot and .com, and I was in the live chat forums talking back and forth with some people who have had encounters. And so I live in Georgia, and so what I was looking to do was to kind of roll up my sleeves and get my nose in the dirt and start researching, the field of Sasquatch myself. And in the forums, I met a guy who lives just above me in Tennessee. And so we got to know one another, exchanged emails, phone calls, talked here and there. To make a long story short, we basically agreed to go to North Georgia, specifically White County, where there's been a consistent, I guess, I don't want to say outbreak, but just consistent sightings in that county around the fall of every year for the last few years. And so he came down from Tennessee. I drove I'm in the suburbs of Atlanta, but I drove up to North Georgia, and we met. And what we did was we came up with this plan where we were going to go set up a camp, and then we were going to bring a bunch of gear with us, like cameras and stuff like that. So if hopefully we could have an encounter. Hopefully we can maybe find some evidence and we could log it and do our own research. So what we did was he owns an RV, and so we picked an RV camping site. That's where we parked the RV, but then we went hiking by ourselves for a solid, I don't know, it was a good 6-7 hours. Well, we took breaks in between, obviously. But to go to this particular spot where we wanted to go, it was an entire day's worth of hiking. So we went. We came to a particular spot, and we were way up in the North Georgia mountains. And well, I don't know if this at the time I thought it was a good idea. Maybe it was. I don't know. But looking back on it, I'm not quite sure if this was a good idea. But once we picked our spot to camp, I decided I was going to go camp somewhere about maybe 100 to 200 yards away. And then this other person, I'm going to refer to him as Jim. That's not his real name, but I'm going to call him Jim for right now. Jim set up his camp, and then I set up my camp about a couple hundred yards away. And the plan was to we're going to have some dinner, take a nap, and then go out at night because these creatures are mostly nocturnal. And so we were going to go out at around midnight. So we had a pair of walkie-talkies. I was on one, he was on the other. We set up our camps. I had brought a couple sandwiches, so I ate those, and I was all set to go. Now, Jim, what he did was he had packed some bacon and a small frying pan. And I know that sounds kind of corny, but it plays a significant role in what happens later on. So it was dark, and it was getting dark. I had eaten my sandwiches. I was ready to take a nap. Jim, there was a creek not too far away. I'd say probably, I don't know, maybe just 50 yards away, not that far. He decides that he's going to walk down to the creek to wash out the bacon grease out of his little pan. On his way to the creek, he drops the frying pan, and all the bacon grease that was in the pan lands on the ground. Now, I can't prove this, but it's my theory that when you drop bacon grease in the middle of the wilderness, that's like ringing the dinner bell for any wildlife to come on through and take a sniff. But nonetheless, so he washed out his pan, what was left of it, went back to the campsite, and we communicated on the walkie-talkie one more time. Okay, we're going to set the alarm on our watches, take a nap, and head out around midnight. I guess it was about 45 minutes later, Jim came over my walkie-talkie, and he sounded frightened. So I replied back. I said, "What's the matter?" And he said he thought he heard what sounded like very heavy footsteps around the perimeter of his campsite. Now, neither of us carried a sidearm, which is probably looking back a big mistake. But I said, well, stay in your tent, grab your camera, try to see if you can get anything on film. His tent, as well as mine, but his tent had the little mesh windows. Which they're mesh, and you can still see out them, but they're made like that so they keep the bugs out. I said, well, look out through your mesh window, see if you can see anything. And I'd say about 30 seconds later, he comes over the walkie-talkie, and he's claiming he can see what looks like a big, huge outline of a creature along the tree line. I got back on the walkie-talkie, and I asked him, well, what's happening now? And in a kind of a low, frightened voice, he said that he lost sight of the outline of this creature. Now, about 20 seconds goes by, and Jim comes back over my walkie-talkie, and I couldn't make out what he was saying because it sounded so, like, muffled and almost panicky. Before I could make out what he was saying over the walkie-talkie, I could clearly hear Jim screaming his head off, like in an uncontrolled panic. I went running out of my tent towards the site. I could still hear the cries and screams coming from him for about another 20, 25 seconds. Needless to say, I was unbelievably frightened. I thought he'd been hurt or even worse, killed. So I'm running towards his campsite with my flashlight, and he started running towards me, and he was completely terrified. And I tried to calm him down as best as I could. I'd say it was probably a solid 15, 20 minutes before he actually could speak, in a way that I could understand him. But what he told me is that when he was looking out his little mesh windows of his tent, he saw what looked like big bodies just walking by his tent. He couldn't tell what part of the body, but they were just really big and very, very hairy. And then when he was screaming and was in panic, what was happening was his tent was being shaken very, very violently. His tent shook for a solid, I'd say, 15, 20 seconds, and that's when I was hearing the panic screams. Needless to say, we got back in the tent. Well, I got back in his tent with him, and I just stayed there the rest of the night because he was so unbelievably frightened. The next morning, we didn't get any sleep, obviously, but the next morning when the sun finally came up, we peeked our heads out, didn't see anything. We stepped outside the tent, and there was a lot of leaves on the ground, so we didn't see any prints or anything. But what we did find is that little spot where he had spilled the bacon grease, there was a mass concentration of humongous footprints. And Jim had his camera, so we took photos of those footprints. A little bit later, after we took those photos, we sat down, had some coffee, and Jim was, really calm at this point, and he basically just looked at me and said, "From here on out, I am not going to participate in any Sasquatch research ever again." I suppose he has a wife and 2 kids, and I just don't think he felt like if he continued on, he was going to. I don't think he felt like it was a good idea to put his life in danger doing this. So, at the end, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to ask when. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, let me just say this. To this day, again, Jim, and that's not his real name, and I'm not using his real name because to this day, he doesn't want anything to do with Bigfoot. He won't even spend any significant amount of time out in the wilderness. Like, even if he just wants to hunt or fish, he won't even do that. Now, this happened 5 years ago. He did ask me to, he said, if you want to share this story, you can, but don't use my real name. And he also requested not to share the photos. He kept the photos, and I didn't deny his request. So, but just a little side note. When I mentioned that in the morning when the sun had come up and we peeked out the tent and we looked and everything was clear, when I went back to my little campsite, because remember, I had set up about 150 yards away, my campsite was trashed. I mean, just trashed. Everything was just scattered, like just absolutely vandalized. And we were the only 2 humans out there, so...
When he saw the bodies moving outside of the mesh, did he have any idea of how many there were?
He definitely said more than one, but he did not give me a definitive number.
Okay.
I didn't see anything, but clearly something had happened, and it was unbelievably frightening to such a point that, this just good fella, just a good guy, will no longer has anything to do with not just with Bigfoot research, but he doesn't really like to go outdoors that much anymore, from what I know. So.
Yeah, we've actually heard that a few times from people.
Yeah, I mean, now let me say this: I am nowhere near at the level of you guys. I really admire what you guys have put together. But I clearly have a passion for this. But I got to be honest with you, guys. I was up in the North Georgia mountains just a month ago, and I didn't have an encounter, but I just was, every time I saw some strange, tree break formations, or I heard what sounded like wood knocking, I was getting frightened myself. And I'm not sure if I'm, people who have a passion for this kind of stuff, they say, God, I really want to have an encounter, but I got to be honest, I don't think I want one. I don't as much. I've been reading books about this creature since I was a kid, and I've gone to the extent to where now I'm getting out in the field, and I hope to follow in your footpath because you guys have done so well for yourselves. But I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure if I really am going to achieve that because I don't think I want to encounter one of these things. I really don't. They're hostile. They're short-tempered, and they will not hesitate to kill.
Wes and I, neither one wanted the encounters that we had, and I'm sure Wes will agree that had I had the option, I would have chose not to have had the encounters.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So that's what I've got. And like I said, I don't want to just throw it all away and give up. But at the same time, I just feel like, I guess from here on out, I guess the underlying message of what happened is don't do what we did. First of all, don't go unless you're going in a group, and please have a sidearm with you, because we didn't, and not that we needed it, but God forbid if you've got to defend yourself.
Just in case.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to be smart about this.
Yeah, big time. And like I said, I'm the first one to stand up, put my hand up, and say, "Hey, look, don't do what we did," because it's a miracle nobody got hurt. So.
And can I just say, hey Dan, it's Shannon.
Hello.
I just want to say that in talking to you, my investigative side kind of took over, and we had email conversations back and forth, and I just want to say to the listeners that something really happened to these guys because Dan really stuck up for his friend, and when I was like, hey, do you have the photos? And I wasn't really persistent, but I was pushing a little bit, and he's like, no, I promised him that I wouldn't release the photos, and I wouldn't, and I never pressured him for a name, but he really stuck to his guns, and I think that, the terror that night really has come across, so I appreciate you calling in, Dan.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's very important to protect people that want to be anonymous in this.
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee, even though I haven't spoken to him in a long time, he probably would. I know he wouldn't mind me sharing the story, but he probably would not want anything to do with it. So, and that's why I protected his name as well.
Yeah,
Dan,
good thinking.
Dan, the night.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The day after all of this happened, you guys packed up and left, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, after I salvaged my campsite, which was just absolutely trashed. I don't have any proof or evidence to say who or what did it, but I think you could probably put two and two together on that one.
Yeah, generally what we find is, if you guys probably would have stayed another night or a couple more nights, you probably would have seen the creatures. They probably would have ramped up past destroying your camp, shaking the tent. This was kind of an aggressive move to get you guys to move along, and the fact that you guys left is probably the best thing. I think if you guys would have stayed, things would have ramped up in the situation.
They were working up their courage.
Yeah, clearly we left, but thinking about staying just frightens me to no end. And you know what? And I have to say, it frightens me to no end to think about staying at all, because just a moment ago I had mentioned how I was camping in the North Georgia mountains just a month ago, and every little thing that I heard, which of course is not going to be Sasquatch, but every little thing I heard just got me just paranoid, and that part's a little frustrating because I don't want to be the paranoid type, but I mean, even if you put that aside, in my amateur evaluation, these creatures they are hostile, short-tempered, and they are not to be messed with in any way, shape, or fashion. And if you're going to do those kind of outings, clearly you guys will probably do a lot better than what we did, because what we did was stupid, and like I said, it's a wonder no one got hurt.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
you
it's
guys
fascinating.
did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it was a fascinating encounter. We sure appreciate you calling in, Dan, and sharing it with us. We definitely appreciate. Gosh, what a night! I can't even imagine going through. Well, I can't imagine
Wes,
going through.
Can I ask you one question?
No.
You can ask me.
I'm just joking. Of course you can.
I just want to talk about Honobia. I have a question about Honobia.
Sure.
I think I sent you this message on Facebook, but I can't remember if I did or not. I wish I could look it up. But I know the story about the siege at Honobia. I know about that, where it kind of comes to a peak where they have the guns out. They're taking shots. Apparently, one of the creatures was hit. Someone there had witnessed a blood trail, but the creature never really went down. My question, Wes, is did you hear what happened 2 hours later after that had that?
Actually, Mike did kill the creature, and another one came and picked it up and took it away. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting to, because I didn't know this until just recently, but apparently a a logging truck driver was driving down this logging trail. Now, this was 2 hours after it had all happened. He saw what he claims were multiple creatures carrying the dead creature.
Right.
Right.
And I believe isn't that what Mike said, that it took it a while to die. It was making some pretty nasty noises, blood gurgling, such, and then there were a number of the creatures, and one of them picked it up and they walked off with it.
Right.
Yeah, they went out.
And that's the part I was asking about. Did you know that was witnessed by a logging truck driver? I didn't know that.
No, I hadn't heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that either. No, they shot it. They watched it die. They heard it die.
Yeah.
And they actually went out to get the creature. They were going to drag it back to the house, and they were kind of bum rushed by a bunch of them. And so that's when they went back to the house with their rifles and just waited for the worst to happen. But nothing actually happened that night. The creatures, they watched the rest of the creatures drag the one off that they had actually shot. But I'd never heard that story about the logging, the truck driver that had seen him.
Yeah, I didn't either, and that's why I was asking. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, listen, I appreciate the time. Listen, you guys are awesome. I don't care what the website costs. I'm on it, and I'll keep in touch with you.
We appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Fascinating account. Definitely fascinating.
Very much so.
Yeah. Funny, I just lost the chat room. So.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a riot.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those nights.
Just
got to, like everything else in life.
You got to work for it, guys.
Yeah. Like everything else in life, you got to roll with the punches.
That's right.
Now, let me close this out here. No, fascinating account. It makes you, I think a lot of that was intimidation. It was time to leave for them to leave, and that was their way of making them leave.
I wonder. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know what he was going through being out there camped, because we went through that when we were about, 17 or 18, out near the Nisqually River. But that group wasn't real aggressive, even though it pulled one of my buddies part way out of the tent. We don't think, it let go of him when it realized it was something alive. We think they were just, and the same thing, he mentioned the bacon. Well, we had, pork and beans and hot dogs. And I think any foods that smell or have a strong odor to them, might attract something like that. But, it could have been the campfire as much as anything.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have done like they did and, separated myself into an individual camp and my buddy over there. And just for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of wackos out these days. I mean, safety in numbers always. But that's a very scary environment to be in, especially if one of these things or more of them are around there. And in their situation, it sounded like that, like you said, Wes, that escalation. They came in to check them out. They knew there was food. And had they stayed there, those events would have ramped up and probably become a lot more aggressive.
Well, you know,
What
it's
were you
always
gonna say,
their
Shannon?
choice. Like, they're always in control. Like, we always talk about, like he brought up the siege of Wanabe and how, you know, Will, you brought up the fact that he did in fact shoot one, but the others came in and took it away. Well,
Right.
They might have only seen that one that they shot, but there's always one surrounding them. So they seem to always be, for the most part, in control. And, you know, if you have two campers, they're basically just sitting ducks if the Sasquatch choose them to be sitting ducks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, it makes me think of, like, people. When people are going to fight, you'll always see, and I go back to, because I spent so many years as a bouncer, and I've seen it time and time again, guys will push each other's buttons to see if, are you going to bite, or are you going to bark, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, and I hate to liken it to Sasquatch, but I think that a lot of times with Sasquatch, it's kind of shaking the tent for 15 seconds, destroying the other camp. Are you going to come out shooting? What are you going to do? You know, like the encounter Woody and I had, it was a Mexican standoff. Who is going to react first to who? And then whatever happens, happens.
We should probably bring Mark Dobbs on again to talk about that, because there was the incident in Texas we talked about with the kid, the 15-year-old on the bike, and how the creature was moving its lips up and down, showing its teeth at him.
Right.
And Mark said that's, and anthropologists talk about that. Primates do that. They call it a lip flip. And other behaviors are that also. They're, rather than fighting, they'll do these displays, you know, at each other or whatever the opponent is, to try to intimidate. You know, like you said, kind of to see what they're going to do. And if you don't do anything, that's sort of like backing down in a way. So when they didn't do anything, and many of the witnesses we've talked to that were in a situation where there was some kind of a challenge and they didn't do anything, and you're also in that situation, Wes. Well, actually I am too. That in essence is backing down from the challenge. So that in these cases, the Sasquatch is sort of the winner of that challenge, and that's why it doesn't escalate.
Right.
Well, and you know, hearing Will, you say that, and Wes has said this too, you know, with you guys' experiences, you'll raise your hand and go, I'd probably rather not have been in that situation. I feel pretty arrogant being the one on the show going, oh yeah, I want to see one. It would be really amazing, and I would be humbled, and like, yeah, you'll be humbled, but you'll be like crapping your britches because it'll change your life, you know? I jokingly
say underwear changing moment, but I'll tell you what,
real.
in that moment, you definitely, you know, that losing bowel control is not out of the question.
Absolutely. I feel arrogant saying that sometimes. I feel bad because look at all these stories, including you two, and it's changed your life.
You know what the feeling is like? And for anybody out there that's actually, you know, ridden on a helicopter and had it drop, or even like, let's say a ride at the fair, you know, where all of a sudden you drop really quick and your stomach kind of feels like it's down in your feet.
Mm-hmm.
When you're standing near one of these things, that's what happens to you. It's just like, for me, I went cold. My stomach all of a sudden dropped. It felt like it was in my shoes. Right. That's the best I can explain that feeling.
Yeah.
Except in a fair, you're in a controlled environment. Out there, you're not really in a controlled environment.
Uncontrolled.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you have a question or you want to share an encounter, the number is 646-716-8791. And I promise the audience I will get to the encounter that we had recorded earlier in the week where a lady's car was charged by one of these creatures. But for now, let's go to Norm. Norm, thanks for Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, and thanks for having me. And I got to say, this is an awesome show. I mean, I've been listening now for probably the past month, and I can just relate so much to a lot of what's being said, especially that PG&E guy who was just talking earlier. And I tell you, this is like Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, this is like the 12 steps of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You know? I really enjoy your show. But anyways, I'm from California originally, born and raised in Los Angeles. And during the summertime, I used to go visit my dad in San Luis Obispo County. And there's a town over there called Paso Robles. I don't know if you ever heard of it. But I used to go there during the summertime. And in '84, I went there. And so it was nighttime, and me and my stepbrothers and a couple of friends, we hopped in this, there was a 67 Fastback Barracuda. And so we hopped in it, and we headed down to an area called Atascadero, which isn't too far from Paso Robles. And there's a lake over there called Atascadero Lake. And one thing about Atascadero Lake is, and the reason why we used to like going there a lot was lots of freshwater clams and snails. And, you know, we'd go there and get some and take them home and cook them. You know, that was the thing. And one thing I have to always remember is that I used to see like a pile of freshwater clams and snail shells on the shore. You know, I used to see that a lot, but never thought nothing of it, you know. So we went there one night, and we pull up by the lake, and it must have been about maybe 20 yards from the shore. And, you know, we all get out of the car, and, you know, we were drinking some beer and, you know, had a little reefer, and we're just having a good time. And it's nighttime. I want to say there was a little bit of light. I can't remember if it was a full moon, but I do remember there was a little bit of the moon out, so you could see, you know, just a bit, like, out in the dark. And I remember looking out on the lake, and looking out on the other side of the lake, I remember seeing, like, the searchlight looking for something on the other side of the lake. And so we're all looking at it, and we're like, wow, I wonder what that is, you know? And we just kind of, you know, just wondering what it was, what was going on. And so everybody's standing around the car, and so I decided, well, you know, I'm going to walk over to the shore. You know, we're about 20 yards away. I said, I'm going to walk over to the shore and just, you know, get close to the lake, you know. And so I get probably, I don't know, I'd say maybe about 15 yards from the shore. And just as I'm getting close to it, off to my right, and, you know, I couldn't see it because, you know, it was dark, you know, but this thing sounded like it was probably maybe 10 to 15 feet away from me. And I'll tell you this much, if you know that area, there are no bears, there are no wolves, there might be bobcats or mountain lions, but I've heard what they sound like. And what I heard that night, it couldn't have been one of those. It just couldn't have been. But it let out this roar that it reverberated through me. You know, and it's funny because I'm 47 now, and I was about 17 at that time. So this is like 30 years ago. But I could still remember what it felt like. And I just remember it was this loud roar. It was a long roar, too. You know, it wasn't like just a short roar. It sounded like this thing had lungs. And it roared at me. And it just, you know, I felt it was like a deep bass going through my chest, you know. And I just remember turning around and just booking it. And if you ever saw a 67 Barracuda Fastback, it's got a small window. And, you know, I was so scared. I hopped through that window so fast and it locked the doors, and I forgot that my brothers were outside, you know. And they're all yelling at me, open the door, open the door. And so, you know, I scrambled and I unlocked the doors, and I let them in, and they're like, "What the heck was that?" I said, "I don't know, man, but let's get out of here." But to this day, we never knew what it was. I mean, we didn't see it, but I heard it. But one thing I will say is, I don't believe it was a cougar or a mountain lion because, for one thing, I'm 5'10", and whatever this thing was that was roaring at me, it felt like it was roaring, like the roar was coming from my height, maybe even a little bit higher, and just like coming at me, and it was close. I mean, I had to have been less than 10 yards away, and
well, that's very close.
Yeah, I mean, I was very close to this thing. I mean, it scared the crap out of me, and like I said, there's no bears in that area. There might be mountain lions, but see, there's no really mountainous areas around that area. There's hills. It's kind of like Little House on the Prairie area, and there are a lot of deer. I will say that. But
yeah, and if you're pretty familiar with those animal noises, then you can rule those things out.
Yeah, exactly. And just like that other guy, 2 calls before me was saying, come from California, I've heard bears. We've been to Yosemite and Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park. At nighttime we used to put food out, and the bears would come, and we'd hear them. We knew what they sounded like. We'd hear them off in the distance. It wasn't a bear. Besides, there's no bears in that area. But, I mean, this thing put out a yell that just was so loud that, it couldn't have been anything else. And so I never knew what it was. And it's funny because I had always been enthralled with Bigfoot since I was a kid. I mean, I remember in the 70s watching Boggy Creek, and I remember my mom gave me a book back in 77 about Bigfoot, and I read that. So, I knew about the creature, read about Albert Ostrom in Canada and all those events. So I knew about him. But at this time when this happened, it never dawned upon me that it possibly could have been that. I just thought, wow, that was just a freaky incident, and it was just unexplained. It never registered until later on in life when I thought about it. I said, well, you know what? If it was a mountain lion, more than likely it probably would have pounced on me before it growled. And
right.
Then again, where the voice was coming from, it wasn't like 2 or 3 feet off the ground. I mean, this thing was it was up there, So the only thing I could, think of was that, and then again, I've heard like some of these internet tracks of, Bigfoot growls, and I don't know where it was that I heard it, but I heard one time on the internet, and I said, that's it. That's exactly what I heard. And, I've told a couple of people this, and they tell me I'm crazy, there's no such thing, and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of like, well, look, this is what I heard, and, it's got to be out there. I mean, if there are so many, fakes or hoaxes out there, well, then there has to be a real thing,
Right.
But, yeah, like I said, it was a brief encounter, but it was a scary encounter. And it's not till, later on in life when I hear all these incidences, and I got to say, your show is great. I mean, it really helps me to, connect with what's out there and what's really going on in the Bigfoot world, and that it's not just, it's not just a fluke that these things are out there, but it actually is something, out there. And I hate that we haven't got any conclusive, concrete evidence, but I mean, hey, with all the stories and with all the incidences, encounters going on, something's got to be. I mean, if let's just say 1,000 of them are out there and 999 of them are fake, well, one of them's got to be real,
Right, and the one thing about the show is it's become a real good place for all of us to connect.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I feel like. I mean, when I listen to you guys and listen to your encounters, especially yours, Will's, and even Woody's, I can sort of connect because it's the situations where you don't expect something to happen, and then when it happens, it kind of throws you off, and you're wondering, what the heck is this, And then,
right.
afterwards, when you kick back, you contemplate and meditate on it, you can only come up with one conclusion. That's, it's got to be this Bigfoot or this Sasquatch, And that's the only thing that I could come up with is that it's got to be that. And then once again, you know, when I realized that in that area there's lots of deer, and then of course we're here by the lake, and there's all these shell, you know, clams and snails. I could have possibly came up to it when it was eating on this stuff, and I just got too close to it, and it just let out a growl, letting me know, hey man, you're too close to me. Get me closer, and you know we're gonna dance. And,
yeah, very possible.
I didn't
very
want
possible.
to dance. I took off. But no, I'm grateful for your Ghosts show. I mean, it's a great show. Keep it up. I look forward to December 1st coming along. I'm definitely going to be a paid subscriber. But I want to say, just keep up the good work, and just keep up the great work. But thanks for letting me be on and telling my story, my encounter, and relating to my encounter, because I even tell my wife if she thinks I'm crazy. At least I can talk to you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, you kind of relate with me and say, well, no, but I think you got all 52 cards. It's just these things just happen. But once again, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Norm. We really do appreciate your calling in and sharing your encounter. What's funny about Norm's encounter is he's within 10 yards of something growling and vocalizing at him. And if it's a mountain lion or if it's a bear and you're that close and they're vocalizing at you, you're in trouble. It's not a warning to back off. It's usually a warning, I'm coming at you, and you're going to pay the price now for getting that close. Especially mountain lions.
Right, they're going to run if they're that close normally. And you're right. If they're going to vocalize, then they're probably going to attack.
Right.
Yeah.
Scary encounter.
Very much.
Well, let's jump to. I'll tell you what. Let's jump to Brian. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for calling in. Did you want to share your encounter?
Sure. It's not really your typical encounter like I've heard a lot of other people's stories. This happened about a little over 20 years ago in North Texas, a small town called Bowie. And it was actually inside the city limits. I had been at a Christmas party earlier that night, and after that party had ended, a few of my other friends, we were going to get together and continue the festivities. And so when I arrived at one of their houses, got out of the truck, and I'd seen one of my friend's cars was already parked there. So got out, and my girlfriend was with me, and we heard this noise coming from behind us, and it sounded like it was across the street at another house. And I hate making the sound because it sounds funny, but I called it kind of a very poor imitation of a duck.
Now I want to hear it.
Me too.
All right, it was kind of like this. Wow, wow. I mean, it was just, and I thought it was my friends over there. I thought they were hiding over in the bushes of this house, and I figured they were just trying to play a joke on me. So I start walking that direction, and I looked over, and I noticed my girlfriend. She had stopped walking. She had just kind of frozen in her tracks. And I didn't really think a whole lot of it. She just doesn't walk over there, so I kept going. And about that time, another guy that had been at the other party, he pulls up to the stop sign beside this house. And he's sitting there, and another car is coming, and it was another guy from the party, but he was making a right turn and he was going to be turning right beside this guy sitting at the stop sign. And he slammed on his brakes and stopped kind of mid-turn. And their trucks were fairly close to each other, and I thought, well, they're talking to each other. So, and I was already getting pretty close to them, so I thought, well, I'll just go see what they're doing. And about that time, they both took off. The guy sitting at the stop sign, he took off in reverse, and the other guy, he continued in his turn, and I thought they were racing because they took off really fast. The guy that was going in reverse, he stopped, and there's an alley that goes behind this house that I was walking towards. And he took off down that alley. And the other guy kept going until he got to the next cross street, and then he turned down that street. Well, I was pretty puzzled about what I'd just seen, so I'll go see what they're doing. Got back in my truck, and my girlfriend, she was still quiet. She hadn't said a word yet. And we get back down to the other house where the other Christmas party was at. And the guy that had taken off in reverse and gone down the alley, he was already back at this house. And I got there about the same time as the other guy in the other truck did. And when he got out, they both just, did you see that? You know, what the hell was that? I never saw what they were talking about. But anyway, this is what they said happened. As they both got to that intersection, they said something huge had walked in between their trucks, and it was walking towards me, and I was walking towards it. They said that they thought it had a white sheet over it because it looked like it had a sheet over its head, but it didn't go down all the way. They said they could see these hairy legs and pig feet hanging out the bottom. And anyway, when they both took off, they were chasing it because it had basically it got in between them, and then it turned and ran. And when the guy went down the alley after it, he said he lost it. It just completely outpaced the truck. He said he got up to 40 miles an hour going down that alley.
Good Lord.
So anyway, it was kind of an interesting event, and I wasn't really sure what to think about it. The main thing I didn't understand why everybody there saw this thing and I didn't.
You were in the same area when they were?
Yeah, I was, of course, the only thing separating me from my girlfriend was the pickup bed, so there was probably 5 feet in between us. And, of course, she saw it and stopped walking. The other two guys, of course, they were a lot closer to it, but they were in their trucks.
Right.
And I was just in the street walking to it. Anyway, I guess last week I was listening to one of your archive shows, and it may have been one of the ones with Kunbo on it, and he was talking about infrasound, and he made a sound that it just really triggered the memory of this event to me, the sound he made. And it reminded me of the sound I'd heard that night. And so I didn't know, if these things can possibly use infrasound. if that would affect my vision somehow. I mean, if I was being lured towards it, I don't know.
Yeah, infrasound has a lot of different effects on people. A lot of weird effects. A lot of stuff. I think that when you start reading about infrasound, it almost sounds like magic, the way it affects the human body. So, I mean, it could possibly be. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, there's just so many things they don't know yet. It's all relatively new, and it's not out of the question that the Sasquatch can't use it. So, sure, I mean, at this point, you know, we have to keep our minds open about all the possibilities. Yeah,
and that's another thing. You know, I never associated this with, you know, it being a Sasquatch encounter. You know, especially then at the time, it was around 1993, probably the most I'd ever seen or heard about Sasquatch was the Patterson film. And I didn't even have cable back then, so it was just the, you know, occasional special when it would be on, like maybe a news clip or Unsolved Mysteries or something like that. So I really didn't have a whole lot of knowledge to go on.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate it, Brian. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your encounter with us. It's something that kind of changes your life, doesn't it?
Well, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I was barely 21 at the time, and it just, I don't know. I think if I had seen it, it might have had more of an effect on me. But right. Just kind of going through the years with just kind of having to live with what I was told from everyone else, I don't know. It's just kind of, well, that was neat. I'm glad I didn't get eaten.
Right. Well, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing that with us.
Well, I appreciate you guys having this show and this forum for you know, for people to be able to call in and talk about these things.
We appreciate all of you.
Thanks so much, Brian. We appreciate it, man. Did you guys see that that photo? I was just laughing about it. I know the three of us talked about it. There's a photo going around on Facebook, and I laugh every time I laugh every time I see it. The two pot smokers.
Yeah.
They just look like they got done smoking the stickiest of the icky, and they're laying their heads back. And the title of it says that we lit a fire, we contacted the Sasquatch people, and we asked them to make an appearance. And when you look at the photo, it's these two stoners with their heads back, and they look like they're in comment. And they didn't really light a fire, though. It's typical stoner behavior. They lit a candle and said, "Oh, we lit a fire."
And then you see these two. And it actually looks like it's a light bulb instead of a lit candle.
It almost does. You're right, Will.
So for the audience out there, I'll paint the picture. It's these two people sitting in the woods. Their heads are cocked back on trees. Their eyes are shut. There's a candle sitting on a rock. There's arrows pointing down, and then it looks like someone photoshopped in this smoke of the Sasquatches, and the Sasquatches looked all educated and everything. They're sitting there like it almost looks like they have pipes in their mouth, and they're all sitting around the
Sasquatches.
It was the hilarious thing I've ever seen. It was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen in my life.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And they had to have the big arrows so that you would be sure to see them.
Huge. Here they are. There's the Sasquatches cloaking. Mid-cloak.
Yeah, sure they are.
Pretty hilarious. I'll have to put that up on the fan page. Well, let's jump to. I'll tell you what. We'll take one more call, and then I'll play the interview we did earlier in the week. I'll tell you what. Let's go to, or I might take 2 more calls. Let's jump to Jack. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really enjoy your show. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Last month, I was up hunting up in Paiute County in Utah. It's kind of the center of the state. My buddy Chuck and I were there, and we usually have a reunion up there and all that kind of stuff. But we were driving up one of the canyons there, and we got kind of way up where you could see the canyon, and then it opened up to some base of some mountains, and the road switched back there. So we stopped there, and I've been kind of trying a whoop, and so I whooped about 3 times, didn't hear anything, whooped one more time, and got a really loud, distinct whistle, and that was all. And I've never heard that before, so it was really interesting to me. I know there's no people in that area. It's really a hard place to get to. Then we were in another part of the mountain, and I tried another whoop, and I've got a bionic ear. It's kind of like a satellite dish with a microphone in the middle of it, and I heard some tree knocks. So I hurried up and connected a little digital recorder, and I did a few more whoops and could hear a dog barking way off in the distance, but no more tree knocks. When I got home here a couple weeks ago, I played it, and right at the beginning, they're way in the distance. You could hear 2 whoops. And so I thought, wow, these 2 things happened probably 10 miles apart in that area. And so I sent those 2 whoops to a friend who took them and cut out the dog barks and just kept the whoops. And then he sent me back 2 other recordings that he had received, and they all 3 sound almost identical. So I'm wondering what you guys, think of the whistle and that kind of thing. And then I have one more encounter to share.
Well, the whistle is something the Sasquatches have done for a long, long time. In fact, the Indians talk about that much more than any other type of vocalization. So that's pretty normal.
Is that kind of like a locator, I'm over here kind of thing, you think? Or?
It's possible. It's really hard telling at this point.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, when you hear these other 2 whoops, you hear a dog bark. It's probably, it sounds like it's close to where the whoops came from. I'm wondering if they maybe make a dog bark noise.
Yeah, they imitate a lot of things. And one thing to remember, too, people like to generalize when it comes to these things, but like with chimps and gorillas, other primates, is they might make very similar sounds throughout the species, but they're group specific as towards the meanings. So what one group does might be something entirely different to another group.
Okay. Yeah, those whoops were a ways away from where we heard the tree knocks. The tree knocks were closer to us. And I've heard tree knocks before. So it was a lot of fun to be able to hear those responses, and I don't know if it's the whoop I'm doing or if it's just, a coincidence. We had another encounter. The place that we camp is out in the woods, and it's right by a creek, and we had one of the nephews brought his girlfriend and their 3-year-old boy, and he was always running around camp making all kinds of noise and yells and screams. And one of the nights, they had actually taken off and gone to Las Vegas for a couple of days. But the night they left, we were sitting around a campfire, and just before it got dark, 3 of us heard it sounded like a kid crying off in the woods. And we kept listening to it, and it sounded again just like a little kid crying. And later, when it got dark, we kept hearing noises near us in the camp area. And my 2 brothers thought, no, that's a bear. It's not a Bigfoot. And I thought, well, I've never heard a bear make a crying noise. So they finally got really concerned and one of the brothers jumped in his truck and drove around that area and didn't see anything. But it stopped. So I'm wondering again if they're mimicking or what the reason for, Bigfoot coming in, because the next morning Chuck and I walked around and we found a footprint.
Yeah, that kid crying that you mentioned, Jack, I've heard that a couple times, and it's always disturbing when you hear it because it's not, it doesn't sound quite like a kid crying, but that's the only thing that's the only thing I can liken it to. Why they do that, I don't know. I know previous caller had talked about the siege of Honabi, and one of the things that they used to do out there is they used to mimic him calling for his dogs, especially when other people were at the house. They would be out in the woods mimicking him calling for his dogs. And I don't know if it was to draw them out into the woods for a trap. I don't know why they would do that. I've heard that strange kid crying mimicking that you talk about, though.
And I'm wondering, that little kid was always taken off, and he'd take off out in the woods, and we were really trying to keep an eye on him because I was afraid if he ran out there, I didn't know what would happen to him.
There's an encounter that David Pilates talks about in one of his books to where the girl had no recollection. Excuse me. I swear I'm still fighting this cold, so I apologize to everyone for coughing. David Pilates had mentioned this encounter that this little girl had heard. It sounded like a child crying, and that's the last thing she remembers. They found her like 30 miles away and over 2 mountain ranges, but she had no recollection of how she had gotten there or anything, but she had heard this. The only description she had given was, I had heard what sounded like another child crying, and so I went to it, and that's the last thing she remembers within that encounter. So if it's a trap or if it's something that they're doing, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. This last July, I was up in Washington. Chuck and I went up there, and we were up around Bigfoot sport. And Skokomish, I think it's Skokomish tribal area. Anyhow, there's a road up there called Hamma Road in the Olympic Peninsula. Do you know where that is?
I know the area.
Okay. We drove up that road, and about a mile or two up in the road, there was about a 30-foot tree, green leaves, green tree knocked down across the road. And so we jumped out and started looking around, and it was about 8 inches at the base around. And we started looking around and found some footprints in that area. And the grass was all knocked down around the tree trunk. And so when we got done there, we headed up the road about a half a mile at the most to a corner, and there was a woman standing there. Her car was parked there. She was just standing looking up the mountain. And so Chuck asked her, "Have you seen any Bigfoot in this area?" And she just laughed at us. And so we turned around, came back and looked at the tree some more, and I did my whoops. And after, probably 5 or 8 minutes, I heard a tree knock, 3 tree knocks down by where the woman was. And then we had a single tree knock right by, it was close to us. It was in the trees. I don't know, 50 feet away, 50 yards maybe. And so the next thing we knew is that woman and her husband came flying down the road and stopped where we were and wanted to know what that noise was. And I said, "Did you hear 3 tree knocks?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Did you hear a tree knock down here?" "Yes." "We don't know what that is, but we're leaving." And they took off. We never saw them, but it's kind of interesting. They knew right where we were. They knew where that woman was. But why the tree knocks? I guess they were talking to each other, huh? Warning each other that, hey, there's stop, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think a lot of times with the tree knocks that it's a hunting behavior that they do. I think the general consensus that we've come up with is it has to do with hunting. But Jack, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I know we're running short on time. I wanted to play this interview that we did earlier in the week and get everyone's feedback. Again, if you want to call in, we're running short on time, but if you want to call in, the number is 646-716-8791. And here's an interview we did earlier in a week with a lady that says a Sasquatch charged her car. So take a listen. Tell me what you think.
We didn't really get much of a briefing on your encounter, so I'm going to let you just tell us what happened. I guess a little background. Maybe at first would be good. Just maybe what region of the country you're in, and how long ago this incident happened.
Okay, no problem. I'm in Ohio, and this happened in the fall of 2008. And my 14-year-old daughter was with me. And just jump in when you have questions, because I tend to chatter. But what happened was we were just out for a ride. And we were riding down this one road. And the road at the one end is sort of like, the houses are kind of like sparse. And it's more like kind of country, sort of. And people out there have maybe a horse, a goat, a cow, a pig, nothing major. And so we're driving down the road, and my daughter, now, and this is why it's important, she's on the right-hand side. We're driving up. I'm on the left-hand side. She's on the right-hand side, the passenger side, of course. So she says, "Hey, Mom, what's that up there?" And I looked up, and the way the land is, there's a knoll. And about 100 yards off, all I see is like a head, okay, like a figure of a head. And there's this like hair waving in the wind. I'm thinking, I was like, oh, hell no. This is a horse. And, somebody's horse got away, and, I'm going to have to slow down. And I started to slow down, and it was coming at a pretty good clip, and I thought, I better put my car in park, because the last thing I need to do is hit somebody's pet or livestock, and then we're going to have, because I'm expecting somebody to run after it. And I figured, we're going to get into a confrontation. I don't want that, So I put my car in park, and so I look, and I'm looking, I'm going, it's getting closer. I'm like, wow, that's not moving like a horse. And I thought, okay. So then it started getting closer, and I was like, maybe that's an Afghan dog, with the long hair. And I thought, maybe that's what it is now, because it's on all fours. And I thought, So it gets about 40 feet away, and I'm going, wait a minute, that is not a damn dog. And then my daughter's like, Mom, what is that? And I'm like, I'm not real sure. And so it comes up, and it's probably about 30 feet from us. And it's right by a house. It's coming over the knoll from the house, and there's a garage. And it starts to go in front of the garage, and then it just stops and looks right at us. And I'm like, uh-oh. And all of a sudden it comes charging down the hill, and I'm going, oh, my God. My heart was I can't even tell you how scared I was. Now, it didn't come at the door. It was coming it's going to come in front of the car, but it was coming fast down the hill, and my daughter's freaking. She screamed, Mom, what is it? What is it? Oh, my God, what's going on? And she is flipping, and I'm trying to get her to calm down, because I'm already, wanting to flip out, because I'm not sure what it is yet. And so it keeps coming, and she is she is all over the car. I'm trying to calm her down, and it comes right in front of our car. And when I mean in front of my car, it was so freaking close. It was so close. It was so close that, I could see, how, you have, a dog that has, maybe coarse curly hair, and you shave it down for the summer, and it has,
right,
kind of waves to it. That's what the fur looked like. Okay, that's how close we were. And then the hair hung down off of the arms and the legs. Okay? And it was so close that you could see, on its palms, its hands, it was running, on all fours, but when it had its hands running on its knuckles or whatever, you could see half the palm. And I could actually see the creases in the palms of the hands. Okay? Little ears, kind of a smaller head, built like a basketball player. I couldn't even look at his face, because I was like, wait a minute. There's no hooves. There's no paws. That's feet, and that's hands. And I just was trying to process it, and I'm trying to calm my daughter down, because what I'm worried about is somebody accidentally hitting the horn or accidentally kicking in gear, and when it went in front of me, it was and this is going to sound crazy, but it was the world stood still, and it was like the Matrix, real slow. And it didn't acknowledge us. It acted hey, yeah, whatever, and walked right in front of us like we weren't even there. And I was like, whoa. And my daughter, she's still flipping. And so I'm trying to calm her down, and it went ahead, and it went I looked out on my peripheral vision, and I could see that it kept on going down the hill, and there's woods on the other side. But I'll be damned if I was moving my head, because I wasn't going to see if Mom and Dad was down there, because that's the last thing I wanted to see, and that's the last thing I wanted my daughter to see, because she was already, fit to be tied. So, scared the living bejesus out of me.
Did you get the impression it was a younger creature?
Yeah, I really did. I thought it was a juvenile, because it wasn't bulked up I don't know if that was its stature naturally, but I thought maybe it was a juvenile.
How big would you compare it to another, or how would you compare it to another animal in size?
Oh, bigger than a bear. Like we have very rare around here, but once in a blue moon we'll have a black bear, definitely bigger than a black bear. I would say if it was the height of a deer, it was probably about 3 or 4 foot just on all fours.
Did it ever stand up on two legs?
No. No. Not at all. Not at all.
It kind of sounds like it did a mock charge at your car, because it bolted straight for the car, and then once you were stopped and it came up to it, then it sort of acted like you were no big deal and walked away. Right.
It just kept on going. It just kept on running. But the thing that frightened me, like any other parent, is, holy hell, this thing might jump on my car. It might tear the doors off of my daughter's side of the car. And all this stuff is going through my head, and it just, I was like, holy hell. It stops all of a sudden at the top of the hill, and, it just charges at us, and I'm like going, oh, no. And I swear when it went in front of us, I stopped breathing. I swear to God I did. I was afraid to breathe. I was that frightened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was that scared.
I'm wondering, Lori, you didn't get a good look at the face?
Not really. It was all black, I can tell you that. And like the inside of the hands looked like gray leather. Like that was the color. And, but the body type, you could see the muscle definition in like the legs, and the arms were like longer, and it just when it ran as when I saw it wasn't a horse, it was like, yeah, that's not a horse, because just the way it ran and the way that it was like proportioned, I was like, no, that's definitely not a horse. And then when I saw it wasn't an Afghan dog, because then it wasn't running like a dog, and I was like, what the hell is that?
Do you know what I mean? Do you think it ran more like a gorilla or a chimp would?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Yeah, more like that. Yeah, more like that. It was just really scary because I figured, if I just sit here and act like I'm a wallflower, I'm invisible, maybe it won't bother us. You know what I mean? But it was just terrifying how close it was. I can't even explain to you how close it was. It was just terrifyingly close.
And Lori, did any other vehicles come by?
No, nobody. And that's the thing. Nobody was outside. There were no other cars on the road. Of course, but, it was just terrifying. And my daughter and I have never spoken about it.
I'd say what you did was exactly the right thing.
Well, I'm glad because, like I said, when it stopped, I thought, oh, okay, it's going to go along whatever it is, it's going to go along the houses, and it's going to go whatever and do whatever. But then when it stopped and it just came, flying down over the hill, and it was coming. It was like there, and I was at a full stop, and, it was coming. There wasn't nothing stopping it. It was coming.
And Lori, you had mentioned to me that your daughter seems to have completely forgotten the entire incident.
Yep, she doesn't. I've kind of hinted around to it, and she doesn't remember it at all. Not at all. I think she just blocked it out.
What was it that she had said to you? She had, kind of said a comment to you about something that was on television that you had brought up.
Yeah,
she said, Mom.
Yeah, she said I was watching some show on cryptids, and she's like, and I think it was on Bigfoot. And she goes, "Oh, Mom, you believe anything?" And I'm sitting there thinking, girlie, if you only knew what I knew, and if I told you the truth, you'd probably fall out, passed out,
Yeah, she just needs to forget that.
Yeah, it was, to say that she was freaked out wasn't even even touch what it was in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I was afraid all her screaming and bouncing around in the car. And what I was afraid is that she would be so frightened that she would jump out the car and start running, and then I'd really have a problem, So, just short of tackling her, and trying to calm her down because I just can't even just explain to you guys how close this. I can't even. I can't even explain in words how close it was. I mean, that's how close this thing was. I mean, if it wanted to, it would have reached up and ripped off my windshield wipers. It could have put a hole in my windshield. I mean, that's how close this thing was.
It was probably just a matter of inches, you're saying, in front of your car?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Now,
yeah, I mean, it was really, really close.
What
I could have probably got out of my car and walked to it in probably 5 steps.
What kind of a car do you have?
I have a Dodge Caravan. I did have at the time.
Okay. So, and you say it was about 3 feet high on all fours?
I'd say 3 or 4 feet on all fours.
Okay. So yeah, it was up pretty good where you could see it then.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I could look down on it, and like I said, I mean, it just blew me. And like the hair that was hanging off the legs and the arms, because that's the only place it was hanging off of. Well, in the back, like in the back of the head, like it was like a mane, like.
Right.
And the hair looked like it was like real light, like when I say light, not in color, but light as in like flowy light.
Like fine. Like fine.
Yes, yes. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Exactly. Mhm.
And Lori, how far away is this place from where you live now?
About a half an hour.
Have you been back to the area?
No. Nope. I haven't even driven down that road. I ain't taking no more chances. Pardon me?
Did you talk to anybody else after the encounter about it?
No, I didn't tell anybody. In fact, I didn't tell my sister until a month ago. And she was like, "What? Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Well, who the hell is going to believe me?" I said, "It's in a semi-residential area. It's in freaking broad daylight." I go, and see, I'm not in the Bigfoot community, so I had no idea that Ohio was up on the top 10 list or 5 or whatever, for Bigfoot and stuff. So I had no idea. I mean, how the hell would I know? You know what I mean? So, I didn't have a clue. So I just kept it to myself. And,
And Lori, did the entire animal look very, very lanky to you, or did the legs look bigger, or did the arms look, the shoulders?
The legs were bigger than the arms. The arms were kind of like, what's the word I want to use? Like kind of lanky, like. Mm-hmm. And the legs were a lot more muscular. They looked muscular to me, anyways. And you could just see, like, when it was running, you could just see, like, the muscles, like, rippling in the legs. And I was just, like, I was so dumbfounded what I was looking at. I just couldn't take my eyes off the hands or the feet. I was like, what the hell?
And was it head bobbing at all when it was running?
No, that's what tipped me off about, when it was run like it was a horse. Because when I started getting closer, I was like, wait a minute, that's horses' heads bob when they run. And I'm like, that's not going on here. And then when it came over the crest of, like, over the knoll, I was like, yeah, that's definitely not a horse.
Yeah, it's an interesting account, for sure. Definitely sounds like it changed your life and your daughter's life.
Oh, it changed. I mean, I always believed in Bigfoot, but I had never seen one. And the last thing I expected that day was to go out and see a Bigfoot, That was like the last thing on my mind.
I know Will wanted to, he's got The Walking Dead here in about 6 minutes coming on.
Oh, ditto.
That's okay.
I'm with you there, Will.
They'll run it again later.
I was going to wrap up the show, and I was going through all the calls. I try and do some call screening that way, as we bring people on. And this lady had called in, Lynn, who had a great encounter. And so if you miss it, check the archives, because I know we got about 5 minutes left, and we're going to go over into past the 2-hour mark into recording. But you'll definitely want to hear this lady's encounter. But I wanted to welcome Lynn to the show, and then after Lynn's encounter, we'll wrap up the show, guys. But Lynn, can you tell us briefly what you were doing prior to your encounter, and then kind of go into your encounter?
It was a weekend, And it was at night, and, as kids were home alone, bored, and 2 boys came up to visit from town and wanted to go riding horses that night. So we all jumped in his Jeep and went down our road, because we live up on top of the hill and the field was down below a bit. And I'm really nervous, sorry. And so I crawled through the barbed wire to walk out, call the horses, and usually we'd just whistle and they'd come running. Well, I was whistling and walked out farther and farther, and they weren't coming. You couldn't hear anything, and everybody was making noise, and I kept on yelling at them, be quiet, be quiet. 'Cause, I just had that feeling being watched. And there's mountain lions up here and bear, and they got quiet, and it was still. There was no crickets, no frogs, and we had a little pond from a spring, and there was just no noise, so I got nervous. So I started walking back, but they all jumped in the Jeep and took off and went back up to the house. So by the time I got to the end of our driveway, the 2 boys came down in their Jeep, and I asked them, can you please, take me back to the house? And, boys will be boys, and they took off. Our driveway's pretty steep, and it's probably 1/8 of a mile or 1/16 of a mile long maybe. And I'm walking, and off to the side, I could hear something in the trees and the bushes taking a step every time I did, but you could tell it was heavy because I could feel it, not only hear it. So I got scared, and I started running, and it ran off ahead. Well, when you come up to the top of our driveway, it curves, and on that curve, we have a barn, and my dad had put a light up on the corner of that barn. And next to the barn, we had this trailer. We'd throw our trash in because back then there was no trash service. We'd have to haul it to the dump. So it smelled. Then I noticed there was something standing against the barn. It was a really big shadow, and it was way taller than the light. Well, my dad's 6'6", and back then he was the tallest guy in the county. And that just put instant fear, and I started running, and it ran right after me. I turned to my left, and I looked, and it was right there. It was breathing on top of my head. It was so close. It could have just wrapped his arms around me and taken off with me. And I'm running, and my dad had a broke-down truck right next to the porch, so I sort of squeezed in between there, and I was calling for the dogs, and they were underneath the porch. I had a pit bull, and she finally came out and went on the other side of the truck, sort of in front of it, and that gave me, a little bit of leeway to get on the porch. As I got on the porch, I turned around and looked, and this thing swooped down like you pick up a puppy by the scruff of its neck, picked her up and threw her. We had a doughboy pool, and she flew way over that. And it made this horrible noise and took off. Well, kids being kids, my brother and sister locked me out. So I'm banging on the door, and by the time they came and opened it is when my dog was crawling up on the porch. Her skin was torn off her from the back of her shoulder all the way down to the front of her chest. It was the most horrifying thing. I'm still having problems dealing with it. And this was back in 81.
Jesus. So what happened next?
We called for my uncle, and he came up in his Jeep in a shotgun, took me and my dog down to his place in town, and, they said him and my brother looked, they couldn't find anything. My grandmother took my dog to the vet, and there was hairs in her mouth that didn't belong to her. And so she had the vet send it she wanted it to go to USC Davis because she thought, that's the best place to send it, but nothing ever happened of it. She went back later. Nobody knows anything about hairs. But, at one point went looking, and on the side of the barn, there's a tree about 11, 12 feet off the ground. There's a branch, and it was sort of like, you could tell it was like twisted and then broke. And then it was found on the other side of the property.
Good Lord. That's a very scary account.
Yeah, I have post-traumatic stress disorder, and I talked about it a month ago, and I'm back in counseling trying to, because I live out in the country.
It's a really tough thing to deal with, and Wes and I can both tell you from being close to these things, it's something you don't ever forget. I mean, you kind of deal with it after a while, but you never get past it.
It's a life-changing, It is life-changing. I was teased and heckled to where, I just left. I went to go live with my mom. And then all these years later, I find out there's 4 other people in town that had experiences. And I'm thinking, my goodness, if I would have known, because even up until last year, pranks were being pulled on me, screaming Bigfoot at night, trying to scare me or jump out and, And
people are silly to do things like that. They didn't experience anything, so what, they're going to act stupid and do. I mean, I've heard that so many times over the years. In fact, the first time I was 14 when we found tracks the first time, didn't know what they were until a friend's dad explained to us the best he could, and everybody made fun of us for that. Well, all we did was find something and tell an adult. I mean, it wasn't like we went out and invented something. So I can never understand people being kind of that brainless to mess with somebody instead of actually going and taking a look.
You don't want to wish on anybody.
Absolutely.
Especially a close-up. If you're a couple, football fields away, yeah, that's okay. But up close and personal, that's something that I know will, bother me for the rest of my life. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old now, and I cannot deal with being out at night.
Yeah, you were closer than me, and I was about 15 feet away from 2 of them.
Oh, wow.
So I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Lynn,
I wouldn't want to have been any closer. I'm sorry, Will. Go ahead.
Lynn, did your dog survive the attack?
Yeah, she did. The vet made a comment to my grandma that was the most stitches he's ever had to put in a dog in his life.
Oh.
Good Lord.
Did you ever get a good look at the creature when it was kind of up on top of you?
I wouldn't look in its face. You just have this thing, well, if you grow up in the country, animals have a certain thing if you start looking in their eyes, and I could tell you how the body was, but it's hard to do it on the phone. I mean, I could find a picture that's similar and send it to you and then add my little changes to it, but it was weird because in the porch lights, it looked like it had some glossy stuff sprayed all over it, but it was dark.
Right.
The hair was dark. It wasn't fur, it was hair, but it was like sort of like glistening, like shiny.
Yeah, we've actually heard that a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I was just looking at the movie, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called Exist. And I was looking at some of the photos that they had posted of what the Sasquatch looks like in the movie, and they come pretty close. The only difference I would say is that they don't have the size down right. The size is just something so outrageous when you see it. But I can't imagine. I mean, what a terrifying, terrifying.
This thing is, if you took 2 football players with their pads on and put them side to side. This thing it was huge. I thought I was going to be dead. I don't understand why it would do that to me and not just pick me up. It was right on me. And I felt my height to it. I was like, at his belly button, his waist.
Yep.
Right.
Oh.
I know exactly what you mean. I know Will does too. It's terrifying because it's like you don't take away all the other stuff that goes along with Sasquatch and just put it with its size. And when you come across something that big, it's terrifying because you're like, man, this thing could turn me into a pretzel. It could snap me in half. I'm at its mercy.
It definitely redefines giant in your mind.
Yes, it
Absolutely.
does.
Absolutely.
It's like, how can something so huge, not be seen as often, as it has been,
Right. And that's something I've thought about, too, because I know the ones that I saw, and Will's talked about different ones that he's seen, but when you see something so big out there, you think, my God, how could not more people see this thing? This thing is huge when it's up, especially when it's up walking on 2 feet. This thing's huge. It seemed like everyone in the world would see this thing when they're out in the forest. It'd be hard to miss this thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things there, too. First of all, a lot more people do see them than report them. I mean, there's I estimated it when I lived in Vancouver, at least 10 people for every one that did report it would not report it or ever talk about the incident. Right. And secondly, they're not moving. I mean, people for the most part are out in the daytime. And if you think about it, when people are driving down mountain roads, they're not really looking off to the left or the right. They're kind of fixated down the road or whatever it is they're going to.
Right.
And then depending on the time of year, the amount of foliage, you don't get that much vision off to your left and right. So, if it's outside your range of vision, which is 20 yards maybe, tops, you're not going to see anything. And then these guys are feeding primarily at night. So that's the reason they're not seen by multitudes of people. But there are a lot of sightings, probably more sightings of these things than people actually see bear out in the wild. I'd be willing to say that.
Right. And I'm wondering now, because, there's bear coming out of the hills and stuff. There's been a few that have been hit in the area because of the drought. I moved, 35 miles away from where I was raised, and even though there was mountain lion in the driveway and a deer down the road, well, deer come in my yard, but a bear down the dirt road, I still feel scared to go outside at night, knowing, there is a possibility, it could come to my house, and I do have to drive at night at certain times, and I can pick out anything that's not right on the side of the road. I mean, my fear is coming around the corner, and it's going to be right there in the road, and I don't want to ever see it again, up close. But it's just a constant fear.
Right.
Well, Lynn, I know we were short on time. I wanted to bring you on. I know how tough it was for you to share this encounter. I know you were nervous, and I told you not to be nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. No one's going to beat you up over it. But I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing it with us. And if you want to hit us up offline, definitely hit us up offline if you want to talk off the air, about how you're feeling. And absolutely.
Yeah, I just think there needs to be a group for people that have had, up close experiences in, sort of like, a moral support group.
Yeah. Well, that's what we are.
Because going through counseling, I'm doing it because I don't know what else to do. But,
well, and it always helps to talk to other people that have seen the things too.
Pardon?
It's always the best help to talk to others that have seen the things also.
People don't understand. I have dogs, and sometimes they get out at night, and they don't understand why I freak out and start crying because I have to go look for a chihuahua. They don't understand the fear.
Yeah, Lynn, you two guys know exactly what you're talking about.
Because it's like, my goodness, I was so sure if it wanted to, it could pick up that pickup and move it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate you again for calling in, sharing everything with us. And like I said, if you want to talk offline, we're here for you. Off the radio, if you want to talk, we're definitely here for you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're sure welcome.
Thanks, Lynn.
Well, Will and Shannon, I know you're 10 minutes past your Walking Dead premiere.
Yeah, we are. How dare you? You know what's going on right now?
You're going to have to DVR that thing.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. It's so wrong. No, just kidding.
I had to bring her on, though. You know, there were so many people that called in that we just didn't get to. I can't even tell you the amount of callers right now still waiting in the queue. And, I mean, God, we could do like a 3 or 4 hour show just taking calls. But I want to thank... Yeah, I want to thank everyone who called in. I want to... you know, it's tough to share your encounters, so we appreciate everyone who calls in and wants to share their encounter. I think the more that we share, the more that we can start gathering behaviors and start painting a picture on what's going on out there.
Right, absolutely.
Any final words?
Happy Sasquatch Sunday.
Yeah. And watch out for those women drivers out there. They'll get you every time.
Oh, boy. Hey, they got you on time, though, didn't they?
They'll get you on time.
Yeah,
that's right. Maybe
Will,
not
Shannon?
mentally in one piece, but you got there physically in one piece.
Yeah.
That's right.
I had to throw up after I reached my destination, but I got there on time.
That's
now
right.
you can have dinner. You're all good to go.
You might have ulcers, but you can have dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we will see everyone next week.